Great. Thank you so much, Peter, for being here and for joining us for our Whistle Stop Candidate Hobnob. We're so excited for you to, get your name out in front of the Winter Haven community. So thank you so much. So thank you for participating in the 2024 Whistle Stop Candidate Hobnob. By purchasing a video interview, you have allowed our chamber to educate the citizens of Polk County about the upcoming election and the issues and candidates on the ballot. Thank you. Since your campaign has purchased this video interview, the Florida Division of Elections does require you to disclose that fact with the following statement.
Absolutely. This political advertisement is paid for and approved by Peter Braunston and Peter for FL18 of the Democratic Party, and I am seeking the office of the U.S. House of Representatives for Florida's 18th Congressional District.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, Peter, can you just start out by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So just in a nutshell, my family, my wife, my two sons, we moved here to Florida in 2008 to escape the Northeast cold. Originally lived in the Kissimmee, Poinciana area, and then 2 years later migrated over to Davenport and then purchased our home that we now reside in 2012. Always had Alan Grayson, we had Darren Soto as our congressional delegation, the Democrats that we had. And then in 2020, after the census, Ron DeSantis created this new district, went from a rather small district to a very large, almost 2,000 square mile district, from becoming where it was originally somewhat urban to a very agricultural district. Decided to run because Scott Franklin didn't have any competition in 2022. I do have an extensive political background that people can read about at peterforfl18.com. That's PeterForFL18.com. To see what I'm about, to see the history that I've had with working for a congressman, volunteering for a couple of congressional offices as well. And again, I spent a long time in politics working on campaigns and really have immersed my entire life into the political scene, usually in the background. I've spoken at AFL-CIO headquarters, to the DCCC, in 2006 for Card Check, which is now somewhat successful, where people just have to sign a card to join a union. And then, of course, really last year, looking at the way that the U.S. House was going and not really doing things for the average American. I do consider myself the average American. I work a 9-to-5 job. I have a wife and 2 kids. I have a mortgage. I have bills to pay. And noticing that this Congress just doesn't want to lift a finger to help anyone other than the very wealthy and the very powerful. So that's why I decided to throw my hat in. And also, which will lead into the next question in just a moment, we'll get into that as the other reasons why I've thrown my hat into this and have decided to run for Congress.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So what do you think is the biggest opportunity for your district in this next term?
I really see several things. And I look at the voting record and the statements made by Scott Franklin. Number one, I think the biggest opportunity, not just for this congressional district, but for the country, we need to restore woman's choice. A woman's health is between her and her doctor and her family, and not between her and a politician in Tallahassee or Washington, D.C., or a courthouse in Tallahassee or a court or the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. It is so important, not only economically, but health-wise, for a woman to be able to have a choice in how her body is used, for lack of a better term. And my belief is, up until viability of the child, or conversely, until in case of the mother's life. Those are the two things. And that choice has nothing to do, and frankly, none of my business. I have a wife, I have two kids. My wife did have an abortion. I'm okay to say that. She allows me to, as well as many friends of mine have gone down this path for more than one reason, which I will leave out of it. The other things that I look at, especially with having a large company down in Bartow, is environment. This area is so beautiful. This is such a great agricultural region that we have here in Polk and Glades and DeSoto and all the way down to Immokalee and Okeechobee, and the waterways that we have that we need to keep our air and water clean. And my opponent, over the lifetime of his running for Congress in the 4 years that he's been there, has a 3% rating on clean air, clean water, clean habitat. He votes against funding for our farmers because they want to include food aid for children and mothers and men who desperately need it. And all that does is benefit the farmers of this district, because now people have a way, whether it's with their own money or government money, to buy food for their table so kids can go into a school and have a breakfast and lunch during the school year and during the summer. These issues are just so important. And my opponent, hopefully my opponent in the fall, as I do have a primary challenger, and he and I can have a debate about this as to why it's so important to take care of the people, not just of this district, but of this nation. And all politics are local, but my vote won't just affect people in the 18th district or just the state of Florida, but it'll affect people from Florida to Alaska and Hawaii and all over this wonderful nation that we have. Also, so many different terms, things that we can go into. There's immigration, border security. There was a bill written by a very staunch conservative Republican that was backed by President Biden that the House wouldn't even bring to the floor for a vote. And it would have passed. And still, my Republican colleagues would just rather complain about the border, complain about immigration, than actually act on it and do something about it. I think those 2-3 points in the next term of Congress and are so important that we get these things done, along with supporting infrastructure and making sure our tax dollars are spent correctly. And then, of course, I'll go into my next priorities when we move along.
Yeah.
But absolutely. And of course, there's other priorities and objectives that I want to achieve for the people of this district in the
Yeah.
next.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So
Absolutely.
I know you went into it a little bit, but what would be your top 2 or 3 priorities if elected?
Number one, like I said, woman's choice. I mean, that's just so important. Number two, the 2017 tax cut that went to 86% of those cuts went to the wealthiest of Americans, 14% to the rest of us. We need some fairness in there. Also, part of that 2017 tax cut every 2 years for 10 years, which we're into the latter stages of, the taxes on the middle class have gone up every 2 years, hurting the middle class. Absolutely. And we need to make sure that we restore tax fairness to the code. And Scott Franklin, frankly, does not want to do that. Another priority, I look at our veterans of Iraq and the health care that they desperately need. And looking at the fact that because Joe Biden did it, President Biden did it, that Scott Franklin didn't vote for the PACT Act. My father served in the Army stateside during Vietnam. My grandfather was an accountant for the Army because he wasn't able to serve militarily due to health issues. My family has given so much for this country, and I want to make sure as a congressman I give back to those who serve us on the front lines and make sure that they don't have to worry about medical care make sure that the kids of those Gold Star families don't have to worry about education expense, make sure that our vets who have 100% disability are taken care of, get the health care that they desperately need as quickly as they can. If that means spending tax dollars on private physicians and private mental health and pharmaceuticals and things like that, so be it. They should not have to spend another dime. And even our veterans who have served their 20 years and reach retirement, their families shouldn't have to worry about those expenses going into the latter stages of their life, and their pension should stay. We should look at those cost of living increases to stay in pace with inflation, and that we take care of our veterans as well as the rest of us. And of course, we can go into education, especially STEM and STEAM, as I look at the district and show our children what it costs them to drop out of school, because we do have a very high rate of dropout here in this district. And not everybody is going to be college bound or college ready, but come up with a support system to get them certificates for technology, for working on cars, for even, agricultural certificates for supporting our farmers here, and not just working for a farmer picking berries or managing the crops, but helping the farmer manage the field, manage their farms, and be a part of it. Absolutely. There's just so many opportunities out there for this district that over the last 30, 40 years, we're falling behind. And not only do we just feed Florida, we feed the country here with our fresh citrus and the cattle that we raise and the fish and shellfish that we catch off our coast. It's very important to do that. Last but
Awesome.
not least, green technologies. I would be amiss if I would, step away from the environment. When I worked for the congressman I worked for was Peter Kosmeyer, and he sat on the Interior Committee from 76 to 80, lost in 80 in the Reagan landslide, came back in 82 and served till 92. And he really taught me that, Jimmy Carter sort of had it right in the 70s. We need to start moving towards a greener technology. Fossil fuels are not going to last forever. And even though the United States, are now the largest producer of oil in the world, that still goes to the free market and may not totally benefit us because, of course, it's capitalism and it goes to the highest bidder. By investing in green technology, solar, wind, water, anything else that may be out there on the horizon, that it gets us off of fossil fuels, because I think coal now is less than 3% of our electric grid, and that solar and wind are starting to overtake fossil fuels and get to electrified cars, electrified buses, electrified everything, hydrogen power, because water vapor really isn't going to pollute the environment. Not only do these green technologies create efficiencies and hopefully lower bills for all of us, but making sure those dollars and those benefits reach the public instead of just the energy companies, and move towards that green infrastructure that the government started to do after the 2020 election.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peter.
My pleasure.
All right. So what do you consider the biggest challenge of the position that you're running for?
I am not in a heavily Democratic district. It is very heavily red, but between the Democrats and the independents or non-party affiliated, I do think I have a chance with women's choice being on the ballot this year, with so many unfair initiatives being out there that the House is looking at, continuing the Trump tax cuts for the very wealthiest among us and really not doing anything to help the middle class. I think this is the right time for somebody like me to jump in and say, hey, I am one of you. I have never made six figures in my life between me and my wife. I'm an average middle class guy. kids have high school diplomas or trying to get one back into college. And I have a son who's on the spectrum who we're looking to get into a certificate program. And I live from paycheck to paycheck. And I think it's time to have someone who understands, not a career politician like Scott Franklin. And even though I've worked in politics, so at least I have an understanding of what the job entails, not just voting, but sitting on committees, but most importantly, taking care of the people of my district by getting their questions from the federal government answered and not giving them a bunch of word salad. And just making sure that that happens. But the biggest challenge is A, name recognition, B, overcoming the issues that we have here in the 18th district to convince people that I'm worth voting for. That's really the biggest challenge that I face.
Why should voters choose you over other candidates?
Because I live like they do. I live from paycheck to paycheck. I know what it's like to, how are we going to feed the kids this week? What do we talk about around the kitchen table? How are we going to pay the car payment? How are we going to make the mortgage payment this week or this month? How are we going to pay the electric? How are we going to give our kids a quality of education and a quality of life that they're proud of? How do I put clothes on the back of my wife and my kids? How am I going to pay the food pet bill? Everything that everybody in my neighborhood, in my town of Davenport, in Polk County looks at. Not every one of us who lives here is independently wealthy. Matter of fact, it's quite the opposite, that we have a lot of people in the 18th district that live middle class or in poverty. And it's time to change that. It's time to stop giving the benefit to the wealthiest and the most powerful among us and start listening to the people of this district and vote what benefits them the most. Sure, we can vote on a farm bill and all that, but what about tax cuts for the middle class and making sure that the wealthiest among us pay our fair shares? What about the fact that a CEO in this county pays a lower effective tax rate? They may pay more in tax dollars, but they pay a lower effective tax rate than their secretary or the guy out in the warehouse loading the truck. That's wrong. That's 100% wrong. There's a lot of initiatives that we need to take under our belt in this nation to make sure that we have the best educated folks who want to have that college education, who make sure that those kids who want to do that other work with their hands, they want to be plumbers, they want to be iron workers, they want to be welders, get that knowledge that they need. It's time to allow people who want to form a union to form a union. I'm very pro-labor. It's time to make sure that our environment is clean. And guess what that generates? Thousands of well-paying jobs. We have so many opportunities that we need to take care of in this country. And it all costs money, and I understand that. And there's no such thing as a free lunch. But it's time for corporate welfare to end. It's time to support the people who do all the work. Not saying that entrepreneurs don't do work. Of course they do. But it's time to make sure that they pay a tax rate at least equal, if not a little bit more, than people like the middle class, the lower class, and that we take care of everybody. It's important. I am my neighbor's keeper. I am the person who watches out for other people. It's not just about me. It's about everyone. And that's why I'm running for the U.S. House.
So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share with our community what you're passionate about. I would like to say to those listening to please come meet Peter at WhistleStop. That's on Thursday, July 18th at the Winter Haven Chamber of Commerce. So please come meet him, ask your questions, get to know the candidates, and be able to make a well-informed vote about what you want to see in our legislation. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me, Chamber of Commerce, and Hannah. Spivey. And last but not least, don't forget to go to peterforfl18.com. There's a nice little ActBlue donate button on there. And I would be amiss if I didn't ask for donations. And you can support my campaign there, $5, $10, $15, whatever you can donate. Very much helps the cause and gets us out there and gets people to know who I am so they can vote for me this August and November.